All right, so this is one of the first of our videos under economics. All right, so economics, first of our 12 or 13 videos we're going to be having. We're going to cover microeconomics and macroeconomics over here. Um, if you like this, do hit subscribe, do hit the like button, and just share it with your friends as well. Right, so let's start off. This is one of the basic videos, right? At times it's asked in interviews, right? The first or the elementary part is we need to understand the different types of economies which are there, right? Economies which are there. The first is an economy which we don't speak about too much, right? So this is a traditional economy which hardly exists nowadays, right? So what is a traditional economy? Now, traditional economy is something which is directed by traditions, customs, and beliefs. Okay, and this used to be the case, right? So about 1,000 years back, 500 years back, it was quite prevalent in a lot of places. Subsequently, I mean, things have changed because nowadays you have foreign trade, people trade with each other. A lot of things have changed right now. So back then, when it used to be there, it used to be mostly rural and agrarian, right? Agriculture was the main part over there. So consumption over here was equal to production. What does that mean? So whatever was produced used to be consumed, right? So therefore, there was hardly any foreign trade. So once again, if consumption is equals production, there's very little surplus, extra items, right, which is there for it to be traded. So therefore, from an economic progress or development, it was little, right? It's there, must have been there for sure, or is there, but it's less as compared to other forms of economies. Mostly in the past, as I said, nowadays, can you find it probably in close communities or isolated tribes? All right, some of them still there. You could find something like this, right? So traditional economy used to be there a lot. Now we have two forms of economies and a third which is a mixture. Let's quickly look at them. The first is a market or capitalist economy, a market economy or capitalist economy. Now this is an economy where the resources are owned by private individuals or firms. Now, if any of you haven't done economics before, I mean, you hear private individuals, firms, what do they mean? It simply means individuals like you and me, or companies, right? Or firms means just businesses. It can be partnerships or companies or anything, right? So it's either individuals or businesses. Look at it that way. Firms is a term we'll be using a lot in economics. Private over here refers to private individuals, and firms, not the government, right? Not the government firms. Remember that. So in the market economy, resources are going to be owned by the private. Yeah. The production and pricing over here is primarily going to be determined by the private businesses and not the government. The government is not going to step in and say the price of this commodity or this company has to sell it at this price. It's going to be determined by the market or the private firms. They're free to price it the way they wish, right? So then, how does it ensure that the right amounts are produced and supplied, and there is no correction which is required? There's something called an invisible hand. You can read up on just Google on the invisible hand theory, right? You'll see a lot on that. This is something which Adam Smith, father of classical economics, right, so came up with in his book The Wealth of Nations, right? So as for the invisible hand theory, there is a self correction which will happen, right? Depending on how much is I mean, the market corrects itself, right? Market, if it works on their own interests, the invisible hand will ensure that from a societal perspective the right amounts are produced and supplied, right? So just read up a bit on that. The demerit over here, right? What is the issue with the market economy? It's widely known. I mean, there's a widening gap between rich and poor. The poor continue to be poor. The rich, I mean, the gap over there seems to be like widening over here, right? So that's a demerit with a completely market economy. Somebody who's rich is going to continue to be given the advantage they have, is what they say, right? So you don't have a perfect market economy, if you ask me. That is wherein there is no government intervention at all, right? It's very difficult to find nowadays. Pretty much every economy, there's some government intervention which happens. They know that no perfect market economy is very difficult to operate, exist, or people don't want that either, right? So close examples are USA, UK, Canada, right? So wherein it's very close, they try their best to move towards a market economy, but you still have government intervention which comes in at times of recession or other attributes where the government has to step in, right? So it's there. Now, the second is a command economy, right? Soon after the World War, there was a race, right, between US and USSR, primarily between a market economy and command economy. Now, a command economy is nothing but a socialist economy or a state economy, it's also called. Now, what happens over here? The government is going to be owning almost all the economic resources, right? So land, houses, right? So the firms, the companies, and everything is going to be pretty much owned by the government here. So the government makes the economic decisions. Now, how is it beneficial, right? Why did people advocate that? Here, the welfare of the society is placed ahead of the welfare of an individual. So, which means um, in a command economy, I can ensure that everybody has a job, right? So they all have a role to play, and I can ensure that everybody gets a housing, right? The basic elements are going to be there. Poverty can be removed and all of that, but it comes with its share of issues. What's the biggest demerit here? The inefficiencies with central planning, right? So in the case of command economy, central planning happens, right? So wherein you have a bunch of people or one organization which is going to determine how many units of something has to be produced, how many units of another item has to be produced, who should be sent to work where, and all of that. So this central planning can have a lot of inefficiencies. It's best if the market can run with it. Also, there's very little incentive for innovation because everybody has a job, everybody has shelter. Why do I need to? I'm not going to be rewarded for something which I individually contribute in a better way compared to somebody else. So therefore, there's very little incentive for innovation. People are not driven to perform good, right? So well, so given that there's no profit per se, right? If at all there's a profit, it goes to the government, right? So examples over here, Cuba, okay, not too much nowadays. North Korea, still it's a closed command economy types, and the erstwhile USSR, right? What used to be there, Russia it is now. It's no longer command economy, but what used to be there till 1990, right? So USSR was a command economy. Now, the economy which is more common nowadays is a mixed economy. A mixed economy is nothing but a mix of the market and command economies, right? It takes the best of the two worlds. Ownership, production, pricing, and all of that is going to be pretty much determined by the private individuals or businesses. That is the best way forward, right? Nobody should come and say that this particular bike should be sold at this price only, or this particular car should be sold at this price only. So it's best if the businesses decide on that. The market determines whether they want to buy it at that price, and accordingly a correction happens. However, some sectors are going to be under the government, right? Naturally. So we have a union budget as well for the spending and all of that. And even otherwise, certain key sectors like defense or like space research and all, of course, it's best if it's under the government. But more importantly, government comes up with welfare schemes to bridge the gap between rich and poor, right? Which is an issue with the market economy. So to bridge that, they come up with welfare schemes for the poor to uplift them. So here you have a big private and public sector, right? Both are quite big, like in the case of India, China, Singapore, etc. Yeah. Now, very quickly, we need to understand the relationship between households and firms, right? This is a common thing which exists. As I said, individuals or household on the left are private people like you and me. Firms over here are going to be businesses. Now, what happens over here? Individuals or household are going to be supplying labor, right? They're going to be working in firms and they're going to be paid, right? Salaries or wages. When they get that money, they're going to pay to buy goods and services from the firms again, and they receive the goods and services. They are working there. Labor is an input, right? And they get paid for it. The payment goes, and they get goods and services from the firms for whom they worked. Is it exactly the case? I'm working for a company and buying their own product? No. I can work for a company and then I can get paid and I can buy from 10 different firms, right? Different products. It need not be from the same firm, right? Food from one, like, groceries from another, like so on and so forth, right? So it's not going to be just from one particular firm, right? So don't think that you're working for one firm, you're going to be buying their own goods and services. It could be a part of it, but not an entirety, right? So this over here is a cycle which happens between households and firms. Just a couple more over here before we end this. Microeconomics versus macroeconomics. This is quite often asked. Typically, when you go and start your MBA, your microeconomics is going to be a first term subject, macroeconomics will be a second term subject. So, what's there in microeconomics? Microeconomics is going to be focusing at an individual or corporate level, right? Individuals or corporates or a sector as such, right? The typical concepts we're going to be looking at are demand and supply, elasticity, competition, utility, cost. All of these are important from an interview perspective. and we'll be looking at that in subsequent videos. Now, macroeconomics over here focuses on economy or country as a whole, right? It's not on an individual or a corporate. So here you're going to have concepts like production, unemployment, right? GDP, a lot to do with GDP over here, inflation, exchange rate, and all of that. Monetary policy, fiscal policy. Students are quite often asked in interviews, and we look at that as well in the subsequent videos. So the first part of this video series is going to be on micro, and the last part over here on the macroeconomics bit, right? Now, macroeconomics, the views, right? There are two styles typically. The classical economics and Keynesian economics, right? John Maynard Keynes being the notable economist there, and also called Smithian economics with Adam Smith here. Now, all of you, there is a third view, right, which is more often used right now, which is neoclassical economics. You can just Google on that. Very simple, similar to classical economics. The difference between neoclassical and classical is in classical economics, they say that the price of a product is pretty much determined, or rather is influenced by the cost of production, right? How much ever is the cost, the price is accordingly going to vary. But something like a neoclassical economics right now says that the cost of production does not play the major role with determining the price. It is the perception of the consumers with respect to the value of that product, right? The product's value. That is what determines it, right? A classical example is going to be, Apple computers. The pricing is determined by the value which people are, assigning to that as against the cost of manufacturing it, which I don't think we know, or I don't think they work with that either in determining the pricing, right? So therefore, I mean, could play a role, but not the major one. So neoclassical also very similar to this, slight variations. You can look at that separately, right? So back to this classical economics and Keynesian. Notable economists over here, Adam Smith and John Maynard Keynes, right? The theory over here, how are they different? Classical economics is more with a long-term view, right? Long-term fixes. Keynesian is more with short-term. Now, self-regulation over here, right? Without government interference, they say, we can take care of ourselves. You do not need them to interfere over here and set the prices, or those are not required. Here, however, government intervention is very important. Market can't, fix it itself, right? If it can, then why are there recessions, right? Why are there ups and downs in an economy? That's what Keynesian economics says. So classical says we will take care of it, right? It's a matter of time where it'll get fixed. Now, in the case of employment, classical economists' view is that now let us say 15 people are unemployed, then automatically they're going to be saying that I'll be willing to work at a lower price and a lower wage per hour or whatever it is and get work, right? Invariably, everybody gets a job, right? Only form of unemployment which exists is voluntary unemployment, who's saying that I'm not going to be working at that wage, right? So wage bargains over here between the firms and the individuals is going to ensure that the real wage is determined and everybody will be pretty much employed. Anybody who's not employed are those who don't want to work themselves, right, or not willing to go at that wage. Now, in the case of Keynesian economics, they say that involuntary unemployment, when private investment is not at desired levels, right, it happens definitely. Even though you want to be employed, you just can't get a job when private investment is not at the right levels. That is investment in the private sector. You can look at it that way. Yeah. Markets, free market, right, to determine production and pricing. Here, the government has to intervene where at times where you need to bring in price stability is what they say. The major issue for classical economics is inflation. We have to control inflation. Too much inflation is not going to be helpful. Keynesian economics says, come on, you need to ensure there is no unemployment, right? That's the biggest threat. Everybody needs to be, you're there for the people, right? So which view is preferred, or neoclassical versus Keynesian, which is preferred? It depends, right? You walk into a B school, you might have different professors with different views. Some will be like, more of a Keynesian view, some with a neoclassical or a classical view. That's how it is. No right or wrong over here. And yeah, so that's economics for you.